There
Hey,
he is. Good morning.
good morning. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. I just sent you a text telling you I was on the meeting.
Yeah, I had to get my earbuds. I left them in my school bag because I've been going to school Thursday and Friday. I went in.
Oh, good. How'd you like that?
It wasn't too bad actually.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I was able to focus better, connect with the teacher better, which was great.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. So
Yeah,
now I'm back to expecting the $500 reward. Straight A's.
that would be amazing. I would love $500.
I'd be pleased to give it to you. You have to earn it the old-fashioned way.
That's a lot of money to just go giving away.
Well, it depends on how much money you have. See, money is relative. So, for example, let's say to me, uh, $1,000 is a lot of money, but to somebody like Bill Gates, $1,000, he doesn't even think about it. So money is relative to how much you have. So to you, $50 is a lot. To me, it's not. It's relative,
Yeah,
like most things in life.
right. You got to be very smart about it, and you didn't get to the place you were without the hard work that I've got to put in now, right?
And well, the idea is when you're starting out, always try, always try to save a portion of what you make, 5 or 10%. Always save it. Don't spend more than you make. Always spend less than you make and save a portion of that and put it into the stock market. And when you're ready to do that, I'll show you how to do that. And then over time, historically, the stock market will compound at about 8% a year. So if you put in $1,000 in year one, you have $1,008, $1,080 in year two. In year two, you get 8% on $1,080. So now you're up to $1,162. In year three, it keeps going. And if you look at the power, you ever think about the power of compounding?
Well, now I am, if I haven't before.
So think about this. What would you rather have, $100, or if I give you an offer, I'll give you $100 today, or I'll give you a penny, but it doubles, the amount doubles every day. Which would you take?
I'd probably take the penny that doubles every day because then, you can go in the future and you'll have something.
And that's the power of compounding. Penny goes to two, two goes to four, four goes to 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. After a month, you know, you're well past $100. So you're better off taking the compounding. So that's why you're better off investing in the stock market and doing it for the long term. Buy quality stocks and hold on to them. Then you'll be like Junior Bill Gates. You'll have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Fancy cars, nice restaurants, beautiful women. You'll have it all. So what did you want to talk about this morning? We can talk about investing if you want, or anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah, I think that leads perfectly into we were talking about jobs a little bit and how you save a little bit now so that in the future you're able to have more. And one thing I thought about, you actually helped me come up with this idea, was uh, the jobs you had in the information and technology industry.
Mhm.
And I don't know too much about what exactly you were doing because I know you were traveling to Europe and Asia and doing stuff here in the States. You were kind of all over doing a lot, and it seemed like you were, pretty important, pretty busy. So what exactly was your job? What did you do?
All right. Well, so my last job, I worked for Oracle Corporation, and I got there by way of an acquisition. So I worked for a small startup in Silicon Valley where I run sales and marketing and support. And Oracle bought the company, which is a very good thing because when you're in startups, you usually have a lot of stock options, which is another educational process. And so they bought the company. So I went over to Oracle, and they asked me to start a business unit, a global business unit. And what that meant was that I was responsible for selling, I was responsible for a team of people around the world who were in charge of selling Oracle's software products for use into embedded technology applications they were developing globally. So I had people, sales and support people in Asia, and Asia, primarily China, Korea, Japan. I had people all throughout Europe, Italy, Spain, France, United Kingdom, etc. And then a large group also in the United States. So I had about 500, 700 people reporting to me. And I was a senior vice president in charge of a global business unit. And so my responsibility was to be sure that we hired, trained, and retained, right, the right people who could carry out the mission being to sell X number of software annually, support that software with all of those customers globally to keep them happy and keep them growing. Okay. And to do that, and so my responsibility was to hire those people, train them, retain them, but then also to set the quotas. What are you responsible for by region? So for example, if I had a $600 million quota, and I'd have to figure out how much to give to Asia, how much to give to Europe, and how much to give to the United States. And then we'd have to set the strategy and the tactics. So the sales strategy, for example, would be how are we going to sell $200 million of stuff into one of those three regions, Asia, Europe, or the United States. And once you have the overarching strategy, the strategy being, we're going to focus on these industries. Why? Because they might better fit the application we're selling, whatever. So we're going to focus on these industries. We're going to focus on these countries because you'd want to focus where the money is. So Korea had more money than Thailand, for example, right? There's more opportunity selling into Korea than Thailand or Vietnam. So what countries, where are we going to staff? What are we going to sell? What's the strategy to sell it? Where are we going to sell it? How are we going to staff up to do that? So then you break it down. So if I said I had 200 million to sell into Asia, I'd have to figure out which countries we were going to sell into. So it was China, Japan, Korea primarily. And then you have to figure out how you're going to staff it. So each of those countries gets a different quota. They get a different number of sales and support people. And then that has to get broken down into how much each individual person gets. All right, and then we have to train them. And once you train them and you hire the right people, you want to be sure you retain them. So my responsibility was doing that globally, accepting the quota from the corporation, which I would go propose to the board. Here's what I think we can do. Last year we did 200 million. This year I think we can do 280 million. And here's why, board of directors. And in order to do that, here's the resources I need. I need you to give me an expense budget of X, which I'm going to apply in the following manner, mostly people and travel, primarily expenses of people and travel expenses. And I'm going to apply that money in the following manner, and I'm committing to you, I'm going to drive this amount of revenue. And then I'd be held accountable to that. And my job would depend on it. And I would hold the people below me accountable to that. I had vice president who ran all of Asia, a vice president who ran all of North America, and a vice president who ran all of Europe. And so each of those guys got a quota, and I would hold them accountable for that quota. And they in turn would have sales directors who in turn would have typically 8 to 10 salespeople each and support personnel. So it was kind of a hierarchy that flowed down, okay, with me at the top holding the big bucket, the 4 guys below me holding sub buckets of my bucket, and then it flows down to all the people. And so what we were doing was selling enterprise level software to large corporations who were building applications for resale to their customers. So the name of the business was the Embedded Global Business Unit, Oracle's Embedded Global Business Unit. And I did that for about 5 years with them, with Oracle. And then prior to that, I was with a number of Silicon Valley startups where typically I ran sales and support, or sales support and marketing. And that's how I spent the last 5 years. And I got into that as a junior salesman. So when I graduated from college, I had an undergraduate degree in finance and investment. And I went to school at night to get my master's degree in finance, accounting, and economics. And it took me 6 years at night because I worked full time. I had Uncle Teddy was born as a son, and so I would go to work. I'd go to work all day as a salesman. My first job was with Burroughs, which was one of the large computer companies back in the '60s. There was 5 of them, and the way that worked was they'd say, "Okay, kid, we're going to train you on how to sell calculators." That's what you started with back then. Calculators were a big thing. So they send you to 2 weeks of school. They teach you how to give sales presentations. They would teach you about the product, and they would teach you how to pitch the product. Hello, Colin. For your business, you need such and such because. And so as you sold enough calculators, you would earn your way to the next class. Was like entry level computer systems, and then they would train you in that. Then you'd have to go sell so many of those. And it was interesting because I worked in New York City in the New York Large Accounts branch, and you would get like 5 named accounts. So maybe you'd get like Exxon, Chevron, Bankers Trust, and J.P. Morgan Chase. You get the whole company, but you'd have to go to those buildings and find the people and sell the product.
Right.
And so I started out as an entry-level salesman, and then over the years changed companies and kept working my way up until probably around 36. I started getting into sales management and out of sales, and eventually roll up to pretty much running a number of Silicon Valley companies, and then finished my career at Oracle, which is a Silicon Valley company. It's the largest database company in the world.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a very big position to hold because you're literally, you have power over so much of the data and technology that's going around the entire world. So any software that's going on in other countries is stuff that you kind of have your hands on, not directly, but you're hiring the people who are going to be taking care of that stuff.
Yeah, and those applications were global in reach. I'll give you an example of one you might have seen. So do you ever see a police car and they have cameras on the back of the car, on the front of the car? They're going down the street, they got these 4 cameras.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is probably going back 15 years ago. In Italy, there was a company called Finmeccanica, still is. And they were developing the software for those cameras as they're going down the street to capture all the license plate information, which was then put into a database, an Oracle database, wirelessly sent back, where they compared it to, is this car stolen? Is there any warrants out for the arrest of this person, etc. So we sold them the software to develop that application, which they then sold out to companies around the world, many of them in the United States. So that was called embedded use technology. We would sell our software for a company to embed into an application that they were developing for resale to their end customer. And we would do that in a subscription model. So you may have heard of the term software as a service. Probably haven't, but software as a service means the way you sell software typically historically was you sell upfront more software than someone needs for more money than they'd like to pay. That's typically the mantra of what you do.
Right.
But the world started moving about 15 years ago to software as a service where you would sell a subscription. So think of that like Netflix. You don't buy the Netflix application, you rent it on a monthly basis. So they're selling you a subscription as opposed to saying, hey, Colin, give us $1,000 and you can watch Netflix for 5 years. So it was that kind of a licensing model. So, I basically had a career of, I don't know, maybe 40 years in the information technology industry. Prior to that, I spent a couple of years in the finance industry, which is what I went to school for. But that's an interesting digression because very often what you go to school for is not what you end up specifically doing. So I have a master's degree in economics and finance and investment, but I never really worked in the finance industry except for 2 years. But the knowledge I gained in learning that at both the graduate and undergraduate level allowed me to understand the mechanics, accounting wise, finance, balance sheets, income statements, expenses, revenue, all of that terminology, all of those things, and run companies. So, it's like I always wanted to be at Wall Street, but for some reason I went down this other path. And there's a lot of reasons I can explain to you why I did that, but I'm not sure you want to take the podcast that way.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how, and me and you have talked about, lots of different stuff before. Um, college, when you went to college, you were kind of, moseying around and you had to get your act together and really dive in there and learn. And that actually helped you in the long run because you got your master's, you got your first job, and you were kind of, going in and out and trying to find your way. And then suddenly, you're the senior vice president at, this huge company, or you've got this important, job at a company in Silicon Valley as a salesman selling software and other things to bigger companies. So if it wasn't for, um, you know, the motivation you had to go through college and do the work and get everything done, you wouldn't be where you are today.
It's true. And then I wouldn't be in the position where $50 or $500 isn't that important.
Yeah. And that's why it all starts, at a young age, right? My
It,
age, 17, 18, in your 20s.
it does, Colin. A lot of it starts with education is extremely important. It's important to do well in school, both in high school and then in college, and maybe even go on to graduate school if you want to. That's important. Equally important, and maybe more important, is your drive, your determination to understand what's important to you and what you're willing to do to get it. So you have to understand, you got to make some life choices. And, by the time you're in your early 20s, you should be making these choices. What's important to you? Is money the driver? Some people just want to do things to earn money. Is the specific career the most important thing? Some people want to be a teacher and they don't make a lot of money, but they have a passion for teaching. Some people might have a passion for helping other people. Like Brooke's a good example. She's known she wants to be a nurse for a couple of years. She set her chart that way, and now she's worked hard, and she's going to nursing school. She's done a great job. So you need to go to school, get an education. If you don't know what you want to be, that's not unusual. That's okay. I was always jealous of people who knew that. Like Brooke knows that. I would have been jealous of her because I didn't know. Really, I kind of knew, but I didn't really know. And then once you do that, then you have to dedicate yourself to achieving with the level of success you want. Not everybody wants to be a senior vice president of a company. It's a lot of stress and a lot of hard work. Not everybody wants to be a chief surgeon at the hospital. Maybe just surgeon is good enough. Not everybody wants to be the head of nursing at a large hospital. Maybe just being an RN is good enough. But you have to understand and think about what you want out of your life and then how much you're willing to give to get it. Because the competition out there is brutal and getting worse. You have to
Yeah.
work hard and you have to be dedicated. You have to give up things sometimes to get what you want. But that's okay. It just depends on what you want.
Yeah. You got to play the long game for sure. Because,
You do have to play it along game.
right. But you also got to think about, the now. How do I do what I can now to get where I want to be? So that's kind of, that's what the long game is.
So you may have heard me say this before. I used to say it to your dad and your Uncle Teddy a lot. You need a 1 year, a 3 year, and a 5 year plan.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that.
All right, now you've heard me say that. It's hard. So it's like, where do I want to be in 5 years from now? That forces you to think. Man, that's hard for most people. Most people don't want to think about that. But if you sat there and said, well, in 5 years, I'd like to be X. All right. Well, then in 3 years, where would you like to be in 1 year? So they're all stepping stones. One gets you to three, three gets you to five. So it's the same in selling. It's like, what's the strategy? Strategy is I want to be the chief surgeon at Sloan Kettering. In order to get there, I need to be the head of a department. And in order to get there, I need to get through medical school and get into such and such a program. And thus you have a strategy, and beneath the strategy, you have the tactics. I used to work for a Korean fellow, Tom Chung, when I was with a company, and he used to call it structured methodology. And I would say, what do you mean, Tom? I learned a lot from Tom. He was a character. And he would get on a board and he would say, look, here's what it is, Fred. You want to get here. Here's the possibilities. Here's the roadmap. You have to think all of this through. It's not easy. It forces you to think, but it's important if you want to make something of your life.
Yeah.
And I know you do.
Yeah.
Most of your listeners, which is probably most of our family, want to do the same thing.
Yeah. I know everybody in the family is listening. But yeah, I think that's really good how you've figured all that out and how you're so willing to share what you know with me and with Brooke and Natalie and Carter and Christopher and Caroline, and that's something I really appreciate because every time I talk to you, and we joke around a lot and everything, but there's always some seriousness. Here's what I've learned. Now I want to help you apply the best possible information to your life so that you can succeed, because you kind of want to pass the torch.
Well, it's one of my overarching responsibilities, things I like to do is to help my family. To me, family is very important. And so I do a lot. Grandma and I have both done a lot throughout the years to help, our children and our grandchildren. So I got 6 grandchildren. I think that's where it's going to end up. And, and we got 2 children. And, hopefully we'll be living long enough to see our great grandchildren come along. Little Collins would be nice.
That's a little ways down the road. You might have a better shot with Christopher.
Well, wait a minute. I had my first son, Freddie, when I was 22.
I don't think I'm going to have a kid at 22. I don't know if I want that.
Well, that's something you need to think about. I mean,
that's the 5-year plan, right? In 5 years, do I want to have a kid? Probably not.
Well, first you might want to find the woman of your dreams, who you want to spend the rest of your life with.
That would make sense. That would be ideal.
And that's challenging too, and you don't want to rush into that.
Yeah.
It's different today. We got married when we were 20.
Right.
Children, kids today, people today, typically are getting married more like in their 30s. They're getting established more in their career. They're partying hardy, getting established in their career, and then they get married. And that's okay. It's just a different norm and a different time.
Yeah.
So you probably won't have kids when you're 22 like I did, but that's okay.
Yeah. There's been a huge paradigm shift, and I can see kind of the contrast in your generation versus my dad's generation and then my generation. It's being able to see the kind of the 3 generations all at play at the same time. It's kind of cool to see the differences and the similarities, and how they all match up.
Yeah, and we're fortunate. We have 4 generations living because my dad's still alive. So, and when I was young, my grandfather was still alive. I have a picture of my grandfather, my father, me, and Freddie when he was young. So we're lucky we have 4 generations. If we're really lucky, we could get 5 generations if I can hang around long enough. And you don't spend too much time farting around. You go find this woman of your dreams and move on, man.
That's what you got to do. But the women are tricky.
Well, they are. And you got to go to the ring. You got to go to the ring. I don't want to use up the podcast talking about the ring, but it's a theory.
You got to show me the ring.
I'll show you the ring someday. I'll find the ring and I'll show it to you. But to finish this segment up, what you want to think about is strategically planning where you want to go, structured methodology thinking. How am I going to get there? I'm going to take that hill, but in order to take that hill, what things do I have to do over a period of time, 1, 3, and 5 years? And then you always want to remember too, you want to learn from yesterday. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. The idea, that's part of growing, that's part of living life. But you want to learn from the smart people who get ahead. They make a mistake, but they learn from it. And sometimes our best growth in life comes from making mistakes. We make a mistake. If we're smart, we think about it, we learn, and we grow. So you want to learn from the past. You want to enjoy today, because every day is a gift. No one's guaranteeing anybody tomorrow. So Christopher was in a car accident. I mean, he might have been really bad, and maybe he wouldn't be here tomorrow. God forbid, right? Could happen to any of us. So you want to learn from yesterday, live for today, and plan for tomorrow. It's very simple to say. Not so easy to do.
Yeah, it's a great thing to live by, though.
It is. It is. Live, love, and laugh. That's what you got to do in life.
Yeah.
All right. What else would you like to talk about?
Below that on my notes here, I've got a lifetime of motorcycles and traveling.
And we could talk about that.
You've been all over the world, not all the continents, but you've been all over Europe, all over the States, all over Asia. I was just wondering, do you have any interesting stories or people that you've met along the way on all your trips?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, so not specifically with motorcycling. You're talking about just in general, traveling around the
Yeah.
world. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when I used to work, sometimes I would have to literally fly around the world. So I'd have to be Asia, Europe, and the US, and I would just keep going on an airplane and literally circle the earth. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Your body gets pretty screwed up. But the one thing I took away from that, probably at a high level, strategic level, is you meet all of these people all around the world. There's different cultures all around the world, and none of them are perfect, and none of them are terrible. They're different cultures. But the overarching thing I always used to take away was people were pretty much the same. They pretty much wanted to earn a living, have a family, and enjoy life. They went to work in order to get those things. But that was the overarching thing. And we're very blessed to live in the United States because we're surrounded by those opportunities. In the United States, you can come from nothing and you can become a multimillionaire. And that's still true. And there's lots of examples of it. But you have to be willing to put in the effort in order to get that. Or you can marry into it. Now, there's a thought. But traveling is a lot of fun because you see a lot of different things. I mean, traveling through Europe is like traveling through history. I used to go to Italy a lot, Rome in particular, on business, and Rome is fascinating because you can be sitting there. We used to stay at this hotel called the Hotel Roma a lot. Had an American bar on the top roof, which is why the British sales guys liked it. And you'd sit out there at night and have a glass of wine, and you would overlook the Colosseum. You'd overlook the Roman Forum, which they had dug out. You could go down and walk in the Roman Forum today, which is where the Temple of Venus used to be and where Caesar Augustus used to be. And you're walking on the same streets. And so it's, going through Europe is fascinating because you're going through history. You can go down to Pompeii and you can see where Mount Vesuvius erupted and it buried the city of Pompeii. Well, they're still digging it out. And as they dig it out, and last time we were there was probably 8 or 9 years ago, you're actually walking on the streets that the Romans walked on. You can sit in the shops they used to sit in. They have glass coffins where you can see the people who died and how they were curled up from the heat. You can see all of the artifacts. I mean, it's fascinating. So going through Europe is fascinating because there's so much history there that in a way relates to us because we all came from Europe for the most part.
Right.
Asia is fascinating. I started going to China in 1998 was my first time in China. I was in Shanghai. And it was very much not open to the West back then. And when I would go over there, people would look at you because they didn't see too many Westerners back then. You were like an oddity. And it was fascinating because Shanghai is divided by the Pudong River. And on one side is like old China, which is where the banks were, the French banks. And the other side was like the newer one. And so you could walk around in a culture that was totally, totally different than us. The Chinese people are very hardworking people, nice people, hardworking people. It's unfortunate they live in a communist regime, but maybe they feel different about that. And so I spent a lot of time in Asia. Japan is fascinating, beautiful people, great food, beautiful culture. Korea is interesting. They went through a war. Seoul's a very interesting city of about 20 million people. So I didn't spend too much time outside of those three continents. Never got to Africa. Very little time in South America. But it was all the places I did go was enough, actually, because it does. After a while, it starts to, when you're on the road constantly. I would fly maybe 250,000 miles a year, and I have 2 million miles right now just flown on United Airlines. Never mind all the other airlines. And
Wow, that's brutal.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's
And you go on 100 plus nights a year, so
right.
you're living out of a hotel.
That's rough. That
But it
th-
is.
Thanks to grandma for sticking with you.
Oh yeah, that's another thing, Colin. That's a good point. So without a good partner, it's very difficult to be successful. So marriage is a partnership. It's almost like a business. It's based on love, but beneath the love is roles, skills, and responsibilities. And so a good marriage is a division of those things. And so I always went out to work, and I was probably the primary breadwinner. But grandma always worked hard too. She used to babysit. She used to do the books for our neighbor next door who had a towing business and a gas station. She used to sell Avon products. Then she was a secretary, and then she became a teacher of handicapped kids. So it's a division of responsibility. And even today, we're both retired, but like grandma does all the shopping, but I do all of these kind of things. You divide the workload in a way that, and you don't even really talk about it. It just kind of flows naturally with us.
Right,
But a marriage is a good partnership, is what it is, based on love and then a division of responsibilities.
right. Because you're better with your hands, so you come here and you're helping us rebuild the deck, and then
Mhm.
grandma's in there making us breakfast, doing the dishes,
Yeah,
helping with the laundry, and everybody's got something that they're best at, and they go and they bring that thing to the table, and
right.
then you've got a great solid relationship.
And it's important that both people are pulling, I'll call it, their weight. They're
Yeah,
doing their, because when you get into a relationship where one person is doing it all, well, one person is doing it, the other one's bitching all the time that that's not what they want to do or whatever, and the relationship starts to break down. And that gets unfortunate because then you go into where the United States is today, with like 50% of the marriages end in divorce. Which is sad, but it's a fact of life.
right.
So you got to.
Well, another thing with that is a lot of people are marrying people they don't really love, they don't really care about. It's just a spur of the moment, I want to get married sort of thing. And then they realize, man, I do not want to be with this guy. I do not want to be with this girl.
So that's why you got to think strategically. You know, you got to
Right.
you got to plan. Life, life is a journey. It seems like a long journey, but it really isn't. I used to say life is like a series, is like a marathon. At work, I used to say this: life is like a marathon, but it's broken up into a series of many, many, many sprints. So
Right.
from here to there, you got to run 23 miles, but I really do it like tenth of a mile at a time. So I got to have a plan.
Yeah. You,
Yeah.
you can't expect to do everything at once, have something happen overnight, because then you wake up and it'll all be gone because you tried to rush into it,
Mhm.
and you didn't really guard your mind and your heart, and it got taken away from you.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your heart,
No, no, you don't.
and you don't want to lose your mind either. Yeah.
And I think that also can apply not only to romantic relationships, but business relationships, friendships, you know, inner family relationships between a father and a son or a mother and a daughter. because in a family you kind of have your role, right? Everybody's doing a chore. The mom's cooking the food, the dad's going to work, the children are you know doing the dishes, or vacuuming, or whatever it might be. So when you're in a family, everybody's kind of doing something, and then at the end of the day you're able to sit down, have a meal together,
Mhm.
and talk it out.
I once had a young guy that worked for me. I forget his name. It's a long time ago, but came from a family of 16 siblings. There's 16 of them. And he used to tell me, yeah, the way his father was the head of a union in New York City, the way we used to do it was, for example, for Christmas, we three or four of us would get together to buy a present for one person because we couldn't afford to buy 16 different presents. And in the morning, my job at one point was, me and my brother had to go pick up two 5-gallon milk things every day from the milkman, but they had divisions of responsibility. And it's the same thing in business. So my responsibility was to deliver the big overarching number, but your responsibility running Europe was to deliver your portion of it. So it was a division of responsibilities, which is what goes on in life very much. In business, like if you and I went into business together, which I did. I had two businesses I ran when I was younger. Um, I did sales and marketing, and my partner was an engineer. He did all of the technical work. It was a division of responsibilities. And that's pretty much how things go in life, in business and in personal relationships, whether it's family or the marriage.
Right, everybody's got to play their role. The metaphorical orchestra. I'm playing the bass, you're playing the trumpet, he's on the piano, she's doing the flute,
Right.
and you're creating music, you're creating opportunity for each other, and it's a relationship, a friendship built on love and care, and then below that is all the responsibility, because you do ultimately want to hold up that love and care for each other.
Mhm. That's right. Exactly. So I'm on board with that.
I'm on board with it too. um, so specifically motorcycles, I know you've been out west, you've been I don't know if you've been down south at all, like Texas or Florida or anything.
No, not yet, but we're actually next year we're talking about taking 1 month and just riding across the United States. A couple of guys, but it's like I started riding motorcycles when I first went to school, and so I lived in Queens, and I couldn't afford a car to get to college, and it was about 25 miles away. But what I could afford was a motorcycle, so I bought a 250cc Yamaha, which my parents really objected to, but not much of a choice, in my opinion. And that's what got me into motorcycling. And then Grandma and I used to get on the bike and go to the beach all the time. And so in my entire life since I've been 17, I've never not had a motorcycle. I've always had a motorcycle. And I always wanted to be in a position to take long trips and have people to do it with. And so after I retired, I bought a touring Harley Davidson, and I got in with the local, let's call it that's a HOG chapter, Harley Owners Group chapter, and they do nice things like that. They'll do overnight trips, and so some of the ones I've taken with the chapter are like, one year we did, let's see, we did we did the Grand Canyon. So we went into Phoenix, drove up to the Grand Canyon. From the Grand Canyon, we went all the way up to the top of Utah and came down and visited what they call the Big Five, the 5 national parks in Utah. Capitol Reef, Zion, Arches, and they're all fabulous. And to do them on a motorcycle is a real treat. Another year, we went to Montana, and we went to Glacier National Park. In Glacier National Park, there's a road called the Road to the Sun. It's about 90 miles through the park, top of the park, where you're riding through the glaciers. It's beautiful. And from there, we went into Yellowstone. And then another year, we went up and rode down the whole California coast. So every year we do a big trip out west. This year we're going doing another trip in Colorado in September. But I just always wanted to do that, and then finally, when I retired, I had an opportunity to do that, and so I've been tremendously enjoying all of that. It's a lot of fun just being out, and every day, you do about 250 miles, maybe a little more, sometimes a little less, and you're riding. You stop. We go. You see some great things in nature, and we've also stopped at some pretty great museums that were pretty fascinating to see.
Yeah.
Buffalo Bill Cody's museum we were in once, and an aerospace museum was fantastic. So we do a lot of that. And so this year, in May, we were going to go up to Nova Scotia, but the borders closed still with Canada, so now we're going to go out to Ohio. And in Ohio, there's this thing called the Windy Nine. At Athens, Ohio, there's 9 different trails you can take, motorcycle trails. So we're going to do that. Yeah, that'll be really cool. And then in June, Grandma and I are going up to Thousand Islands, New York with a bunch of people. That's a 4-day trip. Ohio's a 7-day trip. And in September, I'm going back out to Colorado. So we're going to start in Phoenix, probably go up to the Grand Canyon again, then shoot up, head over to Colorado. That'll be like a 13-day trip.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've sent me, lots and lots of pictures, and it always amazes me how much is out there, in the West, and how much I really haven't seen. Because I've only really been on the East Coast. I'm only 17, but I'd love to get out there and go explore the mountains in Colorado or the Grand Canyon or, anywhere really.
It's beautiful. I mean, the things you'll see are absolutely beautiful. I mean, you could take a trip here, get your father to take you up to Arcadia National Park in Maine. That's beautiful. Or you're really close to going down Skyline Drive. There's a whole road, Skyline Drive, down through Virginia, which is very, very pretty. We've done that a couple times. But, there's so much to see. I mean, everybody thinks they need to run over to Europe to have a vacation. There's so much beauty in the United States to go see.
Yeah.
It's fabulous. I mean,
right.
Maine is gorgeous. California is gorgeous. Colorado, to ride around in the mountains of Colorado. One year, I loved Colorado. I still do. I could live there. I used to have an office in Golden. I had a district sales manager. The office was in Golden, Colorado, which is in the foothills of the Rockies. And the vistas are just to die for. But one year, I said to Grandma, hey, let's take a week off. We'll go to Colorado. She said, what are we going to do? I said, we're just going to go. We didn't have any reservations. So we landed in Denver, rented a car, went to Rocky Mountain National Park, got a little cabin on the side of a stream for like $59 a night, and spent a day or two there. Then just got in the car. We hit most of the ski towns, ended up in Aspen, staying at the Little Mill, which is like a really expensive hotel. So you went from like $60 a night to $400 a night, And you go see Vail. Vail is beautiful. There's a thing called the Seven Bells in Aspen where you can hike up these 7 waterfalls. There's so much beauty in the United States to go see. And
right.
Alaska is another. I mean, we took a trip to Alaska for 2 weeks. Alaska I want to go back. It's fabulous.
Yeah, I would love to go there. And you really don't realize how much is in your own country, right? You think, I live in Maryland, and I've kind of seen all there is to see in Maryland, and then, every state's got their own sort of thing going on.
Sure. Well, it depends on what you like too. Like, there's a lot. When we lived in Maryland, we used to go down to Washington, and we'd walk the mall, and we'd go into all the different Smithsonian museums.
Yeah.
And we'd go down to Georgetown. We used to ride our bikes on the towpath, which would take you down to Georgetown. You go see Arlington National Cemetery. Go to the Aerospace Museum, the Smithsonian Aerospace Museum. It's fabulous. It's amazing.
Yeah, I remember going to that there on a school field trip in 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw a lot of those museums down in D.C.
There's a lot to see. You can visit a lot of the battlefields down there from the Civil War.
Yeah.
Take a trip to Gettysburg sometime, which you could do in a day trip, you and your family. Gettysburg is fabulous. The museum they have there is spectacular, and they do a bus tour of the whole how the Civil War was played out. It's all been restored to exactly how it was, even down to the hedgerows of when that Battle of Gettysburg was fought back in the 1700s.
Have you ever been to Williamsburg?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Williamsburg is nice. That's fun
yeah,
too.
yeah. That was really fun. I went there and we did in eighth grade, we did like a historical tour one day, and we went all around the town, and we did like a scavenger hunt, and we had to find the different people and talk to them, and they would tell us these cool stories they had. And then that's what we did one day, and then the next day we went to Busch Gardens and did all the roller coasters and everything. It was, yeah, it was a super cool trip.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing, if you think about it, is okay. So now we were just talking about interesting trips to Williamsburg, etc., and that's like looking backwards, right? Looking back in time. If you try to look forward in time, what do you think will be different than today, 5 years from today? Ever think about that?
Yeah.
I give you an example. So, cell phones.
Right.
When I got my first cell phone, I guess it was in the 90s. It was a shoebox, basically, and it went in your car and it bolted to the floor. It was a shoebox. And
Mm.
so, I never thought that, gee, it started as a shoebox, it's going to end up as a computer that's bigger than the computers I used to sell back in the late 90s. We're on a Zoom call or a FaceTime call, right? Same thing.
Right.
Dick Tracy used to. I can talk on my Apple Watch. I can have a conversation. That used to be in the cartoons. People used to do that. Dick Tracy used to do that. My
Right.
point being that all of that technology is here now. The Zoom. Where's it going to be in 5 years? Where are we going? Because what's happening with technology is like a pyramid. When you build the base, that takes you longer because the base is broad and it's wide. But as you're going up the pyramid, it gets shorter and shorter because you're building on the base that has already been built. And so, and I sit there sometimes and I think, well, what else could they put into this phone that would make it more interesting for us? I don't think we'll be doing these kind of calls 5 years from now. I think we'll probably be doing holography. I don't think we'll have screens like this. You'll have a sheet of glass that'll just pop up out of your desk. But where is it going and how's it going to get there? To me, that's the fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's real fascinating to see, how it's going to turn out from the time that I can remember how things, were. So probably like from when I was 4 or 5 to now, I can just tell, the drastic changes and differences in technology, right? Even the small things like the home button on the iPhone where you click it and then it takes you to the home screen. And now it's just, you don't have any button at all. You just swipe up and,
On my iPhone, I
Yeah.
swipe up, it looks at my face and it logs me onto the phone.
Yeah, exactly. You
Logs me
can,
onto all these applications. So why couldn't we have that on, let's say, an automobile? So you walk up to your automobile, you look in the driver's side glass, it says, oh, that's Colin. I unlock the door and I allow the car to start. Why do we have to have keys? And so that would make it more convenient, and it would also maybe lead to less car theft. But then I get in the car. If you look at cars today, right? So by 2030 or 2035, most of the car companies will just be making electric vehicles.
right.
What is a Tesla car today? If you think about it, it's a battery with 4 wheels, no internal combustion engine anymore. All of those parts are gone. So it's a battery with 4 wheels and an iPad. And
Yeah.
it's self-driving, and all taxi cabs will be autonomous, and but it's the technology that's going to drive and is driving all of that. So I don't know
Yeah.
what else they can put in it, but I can see that that's not far enough. That's not very far away. You can see that. But like Freddie works for Corning Glass, and you ought to go on their website sometime. They have some very interesting videos about what they see the future for glass is. So when I come to my house, why do I need a key? Why can't I just look at a piece of glass on the door and it says, oh, there's Colin. Same thing with the car. That's
Right.
Colin. So, okay, Colin, the glass says to you, so what would you like to do? and you say, well, I'd like to go into my bank account and I'd like to transfer $25 to Christopher. It could all be done that way. We're on the cusp of that, but that's close in.
Yeah.
What comes after that? We
Right.
just put a lunar Mars lander out there. There's some fabulous pictures of what's going on in Mars. Elon Musk, we now have spaceships that come back down and land on floating platforms. In your lifetime, you'll be able to go to Mars. You definitely go to the moon.
Yeah.
What are the things that are close in 5 years that are going to change our life? Like FaceTime. FaceTime's changed our life. Zoom has changed our life.
Yeah.
What
Yes.
else is going to change our life?
Right. Especially recently, because everybody's FaceTiming, everybody's on a Zoom call,
I mean, so there's a movie. You ever see the movie Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
No, I haven't seen it.
Good movie. You ought to get it on demand. It's like 20 years old. But the thing is, you go in, so instead of physically traveling someplace, like to Europe, for example, you go into this doctor's office, right, a travel bureau, and they inject something into you. And physically, you're not there, but mentally, you're there. You're on Mars. You're in Italy. And you really believe you're there because your mind is telling you that you're there, right? And so that I could see that coming about real soon. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff. That's why it's like, so with you, it's like, so what interests you in life, and then try to think about how you're gonna weave that into a career.
Yeah. That's super interesting stuff.
It is.
Thinking about the future and, how it's going to be in 5, 10, 15 years.
So it's the plan again, right? 1, 3, and 5 years.
Yeah.
Where do I want to be? You 5 years, you'll be 22. You pretty much be through college. And, what do I want to go to college for? Do I want to go to become a biochemist, in business, whatever. But
Right.
you'll in 5 years sounds like a long time, but boy, it goes fast. It goes so fast. So what do you want to be, and how are you going to get there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're like me, you might do part of it on a motorcycle. Who knows?
Yeah. Doesn't matter how you get there. It matters that you get there.
Yeah. Or you may not even get there physically. You may just get there mentally. The way that might be the next breakthrough in technology, that we don't actually physically travel. Because even now with Zoom and FaceTime, business has changed. The pandemic accelerated the change, but people are not going to be traveling for business as much as they used to. They don't have to go to an office anymore. You can sit here and and do the same thing.
Right.
Just have business meetings, etc.
In a way, it's like I'm right there with you, having a conversation face to face. Because I can see you, you can see me, and we can hear each other, and we're just having a normal conversation.
There's the part of socialization that's missing. Like you've been doing school out of your house, but now you went back to school, and now there's a socialization component. You're hooking back up with your classmates, your buds, etc. There's a level of camaraderie and joking around that goes on, and life experiences that we don't get through this medium, but you do through that medium. So there's going to be a world for both. I think the next generation, I don't know if generation is the right word, but where the human is going is into a cyborg. We'll be part machine and part people. If you just look at what happens now, use an example of the guys that come back from war and the artificial limbs they give them and what they can do with those limbs.
Yeah.
They're not 100% human anymore. They're like cyborg. They're part machine and part human. So in 5 years from now, how far advanced will that be?
It'll be pretty advanced in 5 years.
They have suits now that soldiers wear to make them enhanced.
Yeah.
Like Iron Man suits. Only different. You can go on, you can Google a lot of this stuff and see some of it. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
There are a few more things. So I'll end it with this shorter one. I know we can keep this one short. I wanted to talk about.
We can stay on for a while if you want.
All right. Then
we've been on for an hour.
All right. Then let's finish the whole thing here. I got two more topics. want to talk about gaslighting and the media, the mainstream media, and who controls it, what its agenda really is. Um, so, what exactly is gaslighting? Now, me and we know what it is, but for the audience, how would you describe it?
Gaslighting is when I'll say news medias, for example, use them as the example, put out information that may not be factual, but they want you to believe that. And there's a lot of that goes on today. There's no what I'll call honest reporting. The country's very divided into two camps pretty much, and both camps have their view of the world, which is very different than what the real world really is. And so they put out minutia that information which may or may not be accurate, and in many cases isn't accurate, and it is slanted towards their particular point of view, which then makes it very difficult for ordinary people to understand what the truth is. And what happens to most people is they have a point of view that they believe in, and they go to certain news outlets to get that reinforced, like an echo chamber,
Right.
and they don't get the other point of view. And it's very important, I think, for everybody, especially young people, but for everybody, to gather the information not from any one source, because I think they're all tainted one way or another, and then form your own opinions going forward. And as far as the news media goes, most of it's controlled by 6 or 7 companies who have their own agendas.
Right. There's five privately owned corporations that own every news outlet. So whatever you hear is whatever they want you to hear.
Right.
And they're never going to tell the truth. They're going to tell their truth how they want to tell it, so that they can get more people on their side and oppose the other side who has all their people. And it just perpetuates and causes a lot of issues because people really go at it and butt heads over issues that in the grand scheme of things, if you could just put your swords down, stop fighting, and say, here's what I think. Oh, I can respectfully disagree, but we can still have some sort of relationship.
We're at a point in this country where discourse, as you just described, it doesn't really exist. People are very hardened in their positions and won't move off of them. And the news media, um, because they have an agenda, right? They pander to that. They pander to those audiences, and because you got to wonder what the agenda is of certain news media. All of a sudden now we have this cancel culture, which is being adopted by so many companies and people. And
It's ridiculous.
Why do you want to? What's the point of canceling your history as a country? You don't cancel your history. You understand that was the norm of the times when people lived in those times 250 years ago, and understand that and learn from it, and we understand we're in a different place now and grow from where we are. Not just say I'm going to forget everything that ever happened.
Right.
George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the most progressive president of his time. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, these guys owned slaves, but that was the norm of the time. So
Right.
because they owned slaves, we're going to take down all their statues and forget about all the good things they did. I mean,
Right.
people 50 years from now might look back at what we're doing and say that was terrible, but we're living life as it is in the 21st century.
Right. And I think a common misconception, especially with the slavery thing, is slavery had nothing to do with racism at the time. It had nothing to do with the color of your skin
No,
or who you were as a person. The slave trade had been going on for years. If you read the Bible, people owned slaves, all the way back then, BC, right? Even
like all the Jews were
right,
Egyptians, all the Jewish slaves.
right.
Right.
And it 100% had nothing to do with race. It had to do with the fact that oh, you can do work for me that I don't want to do myself.
Sure.
All right, great. And some people were really harsh and probably did beat their slaves, call them names.
Mhm.
And, that was a very, small percentage of the slave owners. But, the vast majority were just employing people to do the jobs that they didn't want to do themselves. It had nothing to do with race.
No. And slavery goes on today. Slavery is a
Right.
terrible thing. But if you think about it, I mean, slavery was, propagated by, well, let's see, the Africans would raid a tribe and they'd capture the people and then they would sell them to the slave trade, which used to be Portugal used to be very big in the slave trade, Spain and Portugal, etc.
Right.
And slavery has been going on since beginning of time. I mean, the Romans used to be really big in the Romans, the Mongols, the Carthaginians. It's been going on for thousands of years. Doesn't make it right, but doesn't mean that we're terrible people because we had slavery in this country either.
Right. Every country has some sort of backstory in which they had slaves. I
So
mean,
remember, going back to some of the earlier things, learn from the past, made mistakes, live in the future. Don't make those mistakes again. Learn from them and
right.
plan for the future.
And
But
that's what Germany did with, World War II and the Holocaust and Hitler and everything.
mm,
And they don't just ignore it, but they also realize, man, we were wrong. We're not going to let that happen again.
that's true. So you gotta, like I say, slavery is a terrible thing. It goes on today. I mean, there's a lot of human trafficking going on right now, specifically with all of the illegal people coming from the triangle countries, Peru, Guatemala, etc., coming here. A lot of those people are put into slavery. You know, it shouldn't, in my opinion, illegal immigration should be stopped. We need a change in our immigration policy. A lot of those people are being taken advantage of. Cartels are making a lot of money. Those people are coming into this country. Where are they going to go? What jobs are they going to get? Our
Right.
cities, most of our major cities have terrible homeless populations right now. Where are they going to go? On the streets? Who's going to feed them? Who's going to house them? Who's going to
Right.
educate them? They were bringing COVID into our country. When I came back from Aruba, this one really gets me. When Grandma and I come back from Aruba, we had to be tested before we were allowed on an airplane to come back here to see that we were COVID free. The illegals are allowed to come into our country every day and are coming in every day. They're not tested. Why? How is that fair? A citizen has to be tested, but they don't. I have to break for a minute and take a quick pause. I'll be right back, okay?
All right. Sounds good.
Go back on the air. Okay, I'm back.
All right. We're back.
We're back live in studio, folks. Okay, so I guess that's a wrap.
Yeah. I had one more thing.
Oh, okay, go
We
ahead.
we were going to talk about books, just share some of the favorite books or book series or authors that we've read.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess my favorite historical fiction authors are Con Eagledon. They're both British. Con Eagledon is a great author who's written series like 5 books each on Genghis Khan, uh, the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar is really good. Another guy I really like is Nelson DeMille, who God he's he lives on Long Island. He's written a lot of different books. Some of them are like Tom Clancy kind of books, spy thrillers.
Hmm.
Some of them are humorous, there's one about Long Island and a mafia don moving in with all the wealthy people and what happened. So he's really good. Newt Gingrich has some really good stuff. Uh, some of it is spy thrillers and some of it is political. Brian Kilmeade, who's on Fox, he's written some very interesting books. Bill O'Reilly has a whole series called Killing Hitler, Killing Kennedy, Killing Jesus, which are really, really interesting. You can read all of those. They're very informative also. Um, that's a number of the ones I like to read. I've read them all. I've done a lot of reading. You're on a lot of airplanes, you do a lot of reading.
Yeah, with those 2 million miles you have on United Airlines, you got a lot of time on your hands.
Yeah, well, you have to do some work when you're in those airplanes too. You're
Yeah.
doing work,
Right.
but you also got to carve out some time for yourself.
Yeah, that's super cool. One of my favorite authors, I don't know if you've heard of him, he's a philosopher, Alan Watts.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah, he was a philosopher, and he started out in Europe, and he was working in the Catholic Church, and then he moved over to the United States and started teaching philosophy at colleges, and he took some more Eastern ideas mixed with some Catholic ideas, and then his own spin on things. And he's got a lot of great lectures that are available on YouTube, and he's written over 20 books on a plethora of different topics. Yeah, he's pretty interesting. I would check him out. Right now I'm reading his book, The Meaning of Happiness, The Quest for Freedom of the Spirit in Modern Psychology and the Wisdom of the East.
Okay.
Yeah,
That'll expand your mind.
that will.
I was reading, pretty much read through it all. This one called Silk Roads. It's a new history of the world. And Christopher gave this to me for Christmas, I believe. But it goes back all the way to like the beginning of time almost, and takes you through all of the different empires that existed and all the history within them. So it's pretty fascinating. It's a heavy read. I haven't finished it all. I read most of it, but yeah, it's a good historical read. You might be interested in reading that one.
Yeah,
It's a real sense of history.
yeah.
Is there any time period in history that you're interested in? Are you interested in history?
I am. There's no specific time period, but I do think it's cool to look back on the past and realize how different things were then, and also compare it to today and say, with the Egyptians trying to decipher their hieroglyphics and what they meant, and the different people that go in there and look in the caves and the pyramids and stuff, and they see, wow, they had a pretty advanced civilization for the time, and just all the super cool things and the different languages and cultures of the people back then compared to now. It's just really cool stuff.
Well, if you look at the Roman Empire and architecturally, what the Romans were able to do, building aqueducts, running water, bathrooms, stone structures. When the Roman Empire was overturned, like you would go to other countries and they couldn't replicate years later, 50, 100 years later, they couldn't replicate what the Romans had built. So they'd use the walls, but they couldn't rebuild the roofs. So, I mean, there were societies like the Incas and the Mayans and the Romans, etc., who were pretty advanced for their time. And then when they were gone, a lot of what they did was lost. The Egyptians were clearly very advanced, and we're still finding out stuff about them, which is interesting, that there's a big dig going on in Egypt. I was reading about a couple months ago, and some of the things they're finding, they're intact. And you got the Vikings. I mean, so they found some of the Viking longboats, and what the Vikings used to do when they used to conquer the world. So,
Yeah, that's all really cool stuff. I think that's a wrap. I really, I really appreciate you coming on. We did over an hour. This it really expanded my mind, gave me a good sense of what you did for most of your life and what you're doing now,
mhm.
and everything in between, where you stand on a lot of different stuff. And I'm sure we'll have many conversations like this to come, away from the podcast. I know we're always talking.
Well, I hope so. And we're going for our vaccine next weekend. We get our first shot. So we finally got on the list. And once that we get our second shot, then, Grandma and I feel comfortable about coming down, spending some time with you guys. And then, of course, we got the beach season coming up. We'll be opening up the beach house soon. And, we'll spend some time riding the waves together.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the beach. It'll be a relief to be there this
Yeah,
year.
it'd be nice to be out and be with family again.
Yeah.
And we'll have to explore the whole thing of the history of the Faradays too. That needs to be uncovered at a later time. That's right. That's right.
But you could spend a couple hours on that one. We've spent entire summers on
Absolutely.
the Faradays.
We'll have to get little Dante involved in that too.
Yeah.
And that's so little anymore.
Is there anything you want to say to the audience before we go?
Well, I guess that I'm very proud of my grandson and the podcast you're doing, and you pull all this together. So obviously you put a lot of thought into it, and that's good. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see you growing the way you're growing up, and that your mind is developing, and you're thinking smartly. And I'm happy to help and contribute to that in any way I can going forward with you and the other 5.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. Thanks for joining. This has been From the Outside In, episode 7, with my wonderful grandfather. Thank you for joining me. I will talk to you soon.
All right, Colin. Love you.
Love you too.
All right. Bye-bye.